Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And today, joining us from Bedfordshire in the UK is Sadia Dibbens. Hi, Sadia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. So Sadia has a long experience in the payments industry and loves helping teams and individuals. Personally, she likes to keep fit, being involved within the community, and of course, because of that, make sure she puts some time aside for volunteering and sharing her stories like she's doing on the podcast this week. Sadia, that was a short intro. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
I used to be a developer, Java developer. And while I was working as a senior developer, I was given various roles and opportunities from management to, try and figure out where I want to go to next in my career. And while I was, trying to figure this all out, at the same time, our organization went through an agile transformation. I gravitated towards agile practices, and I really loved the new and improved organization, really. At that time, an opportunity came across for me to try out the Scrum Master role. I was, in fact, voted by the Scrum team I was part of to be Scrum Master. And I will always be thankful to them because I enjoyed the role thoroughly and I've basically stuck with it since.
Absolutely. It sounds like they had a good insight that you would be a great Scrum Master, probably from having worked with you for a while, right?
Well, I'd like to think so, but I think they just tried it to see what happens, basically.
Absolutely. It's actually, I would say, a very good indication if the teams that you work with think that you would be a good Scrum Master. Sometimes the vocation we have is not transparent to ourselves. So sometimes somebody telling you, hey, you'd be a great Scrum Master can be just the push that we need to get started. So, Sadia, today is Monday, of course, and on Monday here on the podcast, we talk about failures. We do that because we want to explore the lessons learned. But before we dive into the lessons learned, we want to hear a story from you, a story of a moment where you, as a Scrum Master, you did your best, but as it happens to all of us at some point in our careers, the best just wasn't good enough. So tell us that story, Sadia. Walk us through all of the steps so that we may feel we are there with you.
Okay, yeah. This is my favorite question, actually. My son, he's 8 years old. I think a few months ago, he came to me and he said to me, Mom, do you know what FAIL stands for? And I said to him, no, why don't you tell me? And he said, FAIL stands for first attempt in learning. And I was so surprised and happy to hear that. Same applies to adults as well. It's not just for children. Definitely failure is how you learn. So that's why this is definitely my favorite question. I have lots of examples of failures, but don't worry, I won't, go through all of them. I'll share one with you. So this was a few years back. I joined a new team and I started off good. The usual things, you join a new team, you observe, take stock of where they are. I did all that. It was going well. And then what I thought was some of the basics that they could benefit from. And one of those were how they were doing their daily stand-ups. So I thought, in my head, this was quite basic. And I thought, I didn't even think to explain to them that, I want to bring in a change and this is why I want to bring in this change.
And what was the change you were bringing?
So the way they were doing their stand-ups was they were all sat down in the office and they all had so this is pre-COVID times. They all had their headphones on, sat right next to each other. And there was a project manager who would lead the call and take status from everyone. And that's it. That was it. In my head, it was, oh, yes, this is pretty basic. We should huddle for a stand-up and, collaborate, communicate, rather than giving a status update, because then, status updates are useful But if that's all you get out of a 15 minutes meeting every morning, then that's not good value, basically, you're getting out of that time. So the mistake I made was I just went on and laid the law. Okay, so we're going to huddle and we're going to communicate to each other, and we're not going to give a status update, and the usual stuff. That did not go down very well at all. And
So how did the team react?
they were not very happy about it. So there were several problems with this. One was we did not have a huddle space because the office was not, designed for an agile organization. So the office was designed for a more of a different type of working. So we had big meeting rooms with giant tables and chairs where everyone sat down, which are useful for other purposes, not for having a huddle. So because we didn't have a huddle space, I thought, okay, we'll make do. We'll go into a meeting room. So that was my first mistake, I suppose. Went into a meeting room, big giant table, surrounded by chairs, and everyone awkwardly stood around it. They felt, I could see it on everyone's faces. They felt really awkward about it because, okay, we've been coming here into this room to sit down, not to stand up. That was the first thing. And what's the purpose of all this? So what I'm trying to get at is did not explain the why behind the changes that I introduced. And that obviously did not go well with the team or the stakeholders. So previously, whereas the stakeholders were getting a status update every morning, they did not like it at all. It's like, okay, so we had this very useful meeting that was useful for us. We were getting a status update. You brought in a bit of chaos, and no one liked it at all. I received big time pushback on that, big time, and it was, as far as failures go, I would say that was quite fun.
How did you then do next? I mean, I imagine you got some feedback, and then something else happened. So what happened next?
So feedback is the word. Yeah, definitely quite a strong feedback, both from the team and from the stakeholders. Went up to my manager and his manager and so on. It was quite interesting. What I learned from there was it doesn't matter how small a change is. If people are used to a certain way of working, and you want to introduce a change, it's important to start with the why. So not just lay that out, okay, that's how we want to do it going forward. Instead, explain to them, okay, so this is why we want to make this change. So in this example, it would be what I should have done from the start, which I did later on, was to get my stakeholders, speak to them, to also speak to the team and explain that if you have a status update meeting every morning, that could be useful for a status update, but there are other ways to get that. Having the whole team around for 15 minutes, we could use that for so much more, and utilize that time in a better way, but not just, everyone giving their status update and then going on mute and getting on with their work. So they don't hear what other people are doing. So you don't get the benefit of someone who has already worked in that area. For example, they could pick up something in what other people are doing and make a suggestion, but that would never happen if you're just giving your update, going on mute, and then not listening to what
everyone. And then on email, right? So one of the things that this story brings of interest for us as Scrum Masters is that there's a wrong way to do the right thing. Right? It's like it's not enough to know what needs to be done. We also need to adapt to what we are facing at that time. Like, stakeholders were used to having certain type of information every day. If we can't continue providing that information, of course, we need to create an alternative. How would they know what's going on? Of course, for the team as well, I would say for most team members, it's a pain to have a call that interrupts your flow in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on when you have the daily stand-up. But on the other hand, that if that call doesn't add any value, you can, of course, just give your status update and go into email or go on with your work, as you said. So what's the value that it brings, right? We need to ask ourselves, what value does it bring to the team, and what value does it bring to the stakeholders, starting with the why, as you said, and then figuring out, I would say even together with them, like, how can we make this work? Because we, as Scrum Masters with experience, we know that the collaboration that emerges from the daily stand-up is critical, but it's not enough to know that. they also need to know. And of course, they need to feel it. So that's a very good point. Sometimes we end up doing the right things in the wrong way.
That's exactly what this was. And I did, eventually did it the right way, but it was obviously learning from the failure. So definitely, as long as you learn from your failure, it's okay to fail, would be my message.
Absolutely. Great and important message. Thank you for that, Sadia.
That's all right. Thank you.
Monday is about what we learn from our obstacles and our failures. But tomorrow is Team Tuesday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. We explore teams and their journeys, the habits they develop that threaten their performance, how each of our guests helped their teams evolve, and the one key lesson they learned from that experience. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.